Our next headline speaker is an Oscar-winning actress, best-selling cookbook author, singer, and entrepreneur. In 2008, she founded Goop, a lifestyle brand devoted to helping women make their own choices count. In line with this mantra, Goop also makes and curates incredible products across beauty, fashion, wellness, and home. Goop is curious about what it means to self-optimize, about how we can gain autonomy over our health, and how we can push uncomfortable, important questions forward without shame. After serving as Goop's chief creative officer since its inception, she assumed the CEO mantle in 2016, leading the company's primarily female team of more than 240 to exponential growth. Here to give us a look into her colorful career and how she learned to change speed depending on where she was in her life, motherhood, starting a company, or growing prominence as an actress. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us live all the way from New York, please give us a warm welcome to Ms. Gwyneth Paltrow. Good to see you, Gwyneth. How have you been? You're looking great.
Oh, thank you. As are you. I've been very well, thank you, luckily.
Well, how have you been keeping well in the pandemic? Take us through the changes that have gone through these past few months when we've gone through those differing levels of lockdown where we are.
Well, I think in the beginning, like everybody all across the world, we were just a bit in shock and had to adjust very quickly to this new way of life. And I think how it affected all of our businesses and our economies is another story. But at home, it was pretty wild. I mean, I have to say there was a wonderful silver lining to this for me, which was getting to be home with my family for months and slowing down and not being on an airplane all the time and really kind of reconnecting with the most essential, important parts of life. So I loved all the cooking and, us all working together around the kitchen table, and it came with some really beautiful things.
Yes, you have indeed. And you've been honest enough to share in your first Goop Digital Summit that your diet since the lockdown is so bad, that it's the least goopy. I mean, you've been helping yourself to what? Grilled cheese, quesadilla, taquitos, takeout burgers. I mean, that's a bit of something I do have.
Pasta, French fries, alcohol, ice cream. It's been terrible. I'm trying to clean it up a little bit now, but wow, I really went off the deep end, I'll tell you.
Right. Well, you haven't been alone. I went on the deep end as well. I've been following your quarantine recipes online and pretty happy that you've stayed true to this. Your lifelong love for all things grown out of the ground, because I took the greens here and I look back to this book in 2011. Can you believe that? You've already focused on what's green. It really just jumps out. I mean, in this pandemic. But how are you managing to relieve that monotony on your family's palates? I mean, there's got to be some kind of science behind your quarantine cooking repertoire.
Well, luckily I work at Goop, so I have access to amazing recipes and that we publish online and also in our test kitchen. Our food editors are always coming up with some amazing things and trying to solve problems. We were in Los Angeles for most of the lockdown, and there was it was really incredible to see all the local chefs coming up with great ways to keep their businesses going and serve their customer. For example, there was an amazing Korean barbecue kit set that I found where they would deliver all of the banchan and the meat, and then you would prepare it all at home. Or there was a great pasta kit from this amazing chef called Evan Funky, all hand-rolled pastas and sauces, and then you would just cook meat. It was great. So we would order meal kits, and I would cook quite a lot.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, and now that you mentioned LA, I mean, have you shifted to working from home totally since the pandemic, or are you doing hybrid, working from both home and from the office?
I have not been in our office since March, since the lockdown.
Was that a choice?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was first, everybody locked down, and in Santa Monica still, where our office is in California, we're not allowed in still by city ordinance. So it's, we're all remote by law.
So how are you approaching the transition relating to the pandemic, just navigating the changes, the endings, the beginnings, both as a person and as an entrepreneur?
Well, I think as a person, I always try to find the blessing in everything. And when things are really difficult or have a lot of friction or you know, upsetting, I always try to look at it like, what is the universe using this perceived negative experience to help teach me, so I can find the lesson in myself. So personally, I found a lot of really great learnings. From the business perspective, it was really difficult. We were all, as everybody was in the business world, very scared in terms of what this would mean on our employees. What would the macroeconomic impact be? What's the long tail impact of all of this? And again, it really turned out to be a blessing for us as well. What we decided to do was really go back to our content roots at Goop and focus on being of service and giving people great information, great recipes, great ways to de-stress at home, home beauty remedies, ways to relax your eyes and your neck, etc. And we found that, our content and our commerce and, what we do, like at the crux, that contextual commerce piece really started to take off again, even though we had pulled down all of our paid media on Facebook and Instagram and stopped being transactional whatsoever. We found that we started to gain traction in the business, which was really interesting and something that, was a very good lesson to learn. We had to do a lot of restructuring and, getting the business as lean as possible and make some really difficult decisions. But ultimately, I'm very proud of where we got the business, and we're in a very strong place. And I think we'll carry a lot of these lessons going forward with us.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad that you mentioned silver lining, blessing, because when you look at Goop, it's really been ahead of the wave in self care, well before the pandemic. But how did you get to this mindset that women could be everything we wanted to be, happy at home, successful at work, that we don't have to be that one sort of archetype? I mean, what were the triggers of the inspiration behind that thinking that women were ready to have more autonomy even before the pandemic?
Well, I think it's a few things. I went to an all-girls school in New York City growing up. And so I was very much incubated in this idea that women could be whatever they wanted. They could be as intellectual, they could be as brave, they could be as feminine, they could really conceive of the kind of archetypal blend of women that they wanted to be. And we were a strong group of women. We went forth into the world, I think, believing that women deserved more and women deserved to relate to each other in a more supportive, less competitive way. And I felt very galvanized to just be my full self in the world. And, that came with me. I think I always had a little bit of like a punk rock attitude as well. Like, I'm not afraid to break some boundaries, and I'm not afraid to ruffle some feathers in order to push this movement forward. And, and I it's been amazing, especially in the last 12 years of having this company, to really see what's happening to feminism, what's happening to the way that women are relating to themselves at home and in the workplace, and knowing that as long as you're not judging yourself and you're close with yourself, you can do anything because you're the arbiter of what is right for you and nobody else. And I've been very happy to see that kind of really taking root in our culture around the world.
Yeah, love that you said the punk rock attitude, because you zeroed right in on wellness, and everyone's just gotten so much bigger in wellness in this pandemic. There's a lot of interest in strengthening the immune system and how the diets connect to mental health. I mean, it's not just trying not to get sick from COVID-19, but really keeping one's wits together. So how is this pandemic influencing your view on self-care in the way that you built Goop way before the pandemic?
Well, luckily we had a lot of interest, as you mentioned, in this topic for many, many years. The mind-body connection, the nutrition, immune system connection, how unresolved emotions can impact the body in a negative way. So luckily we had so much content there already. And we continue to make that kind of content that our reader was looking at. Obviously, we can see data and see who's reading what and what we should be making more of and what questions we should be answering for people. And so, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Gwyneth, it's just so interesting. The virtual Goop Summit, that was the first ever, and it turned out to be well attended. Do you think that that's because of the increased interest in wellness, or is it more because you made it more accessible and also invited a diverse range of speakers?
I think it was all of the above. You know, I think when you're creating something like an In Goop Health, I think it actually worked out well that our first 7 or 8 were in person, and they were harder to get to. They were more expensive because, of course, of production costs. We always want to make everything incredible and have everybody get the most out of the day. But so they had been branded as this amazing thing. And so I think therefore we were able to take it digitally. I think it would have been much more difficult to introduce it digitally. And you're absolutely right. We were able to make it much more accessible, both from a geographic perspective and from a price point perspective. And it was a super successful event for us, and people felt very well connected to our mission, to each other. We created this amazing community, and it was great. We're going to do another one next year in the first quarter because it was so successful.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome to know. That's news to us. You know, you just surfaced right there the sort of difficult conversations that probably we wouldn't have had were it not virtual. Like those typically eliciting shame as you talk about things that are not so easy to think or hear about. So virtual connections actually sort of surface that kind of emotion that you can't get on a sort of a grander basis.
Yes, and I think that, you know, what happens digitally as well is you afford people the opportunity to dip their toe into the water of those conversations that might be more difficult, and they don't have to necessarily participate. They can observe, they can be anonymous. And I think you're right. You know, for those women who are just exploring this idea of wellness, sexual wellness, nutritional wellness, mental wellness, it's a more private forum digitally.
You mentioned women, and I'm wondering about your target audience. I mean, is the pandemic changing your target audience? I mean, your target audience pre-pandemic are high-income individuals, mostly women, with an interest in personal well-being. But do you think that market has broadened?
You know, we never set out to really have that as a demographic. I think that that demographic had a very early interest in wellness and were sort of the trailblazers in their own community. So we kind of found them first. But over the ensuing years, we've really broadened all of our price points across all of the verticals. And we are reaching a much, much wider demographic, which is great because a lot of people are very interested in self-optimization and what are the tools that they need to really be their best selves, both, you know, from a topical perspective, internally, ingestible, spiritual, everything. So it's been amazing to see our audience really grow in terms of demographic.
It has. I mean, when you look at beauty content and the products that have been popular in Goop during the pandemic, they really reflected on the DIY trend. I mean, I look at your in-house brand, Goop Glow. It had the site's top 3 overall bestsellers in beauty in the pandemic. And I'm just curious, how is the brand's, and you mentioned this earlier, the contextual commerce model working out for Goop these days?
I think we were very blessed because when I started, it was just a newsletter. I was just sending content and I wasn't trying to monetize anything. I had no e-commerce shop. I had no brand partnerships, no advertising, anything. So I had 5 or so years of just building a relationship with the audience, just building trust, building a following. And that's very rare, mostly because I was too shy to actually monetize the business. But
were you really shy? How would that be?
I just felt like, how can I start a business? I'm an actress. People are going to make fun of this. They're not going to understand why I'm doing this. So I had a lot of trepidation about it. It took me a long time to do it. But in that time, I was building this amazing following. And that is how contextual commerce really starts. That you have people who really believe you, believe what you're talking about, are aligned with your values. You're very explicit about what those values are, why you're offering the certain things you're offering. You know, it became, if we were writing an article about something and then we said, okay, and here are all the products that we love, it became almost a service to the customer as opposed to leading with a transactional frame of mind. And so I think that's why it works so well.
So do you think the omni-channel is still the way forward for Goop? Because before the pandemic, Goop is a mix of e-commerce, brick and mortar retail stores, including the pop-up stores, the experiences, and the permanent stores.
You know, of course, I'm reassessing all of that right now. Retail's been very difficult for us and everybody else. We have certain stores that have been performing better than others, and I'm very into risk mitigation at the moment, so I'm being very careful. I will say that I think if we are going to expand in brick and mortar anymore, there will always have to be an experiential element. We did a pop-up in Florida this past fall before the pandemic started, of course. And there was a workout space and a store. And that was, our customer loved that so much, to be able to go into a space and do an exercise class or hear a talk and then go into the retail store. So I still think omni-channel works. I just think that we're just in for a little bit of a bumpy ride, maybe for the next couple of years in terms of physical retail.
Now, to your point on risk mitigation, just how much more important do you think digital connectivities become for Goop, especially for a brand that's focusing more on online presence, as the pandemic's kept a greater number of people staying and working at home?
I think you're seeing across all e-commerce businesses, all digital media platforms, that those who are creating good product and content or offering a good service, everybody's growing. So that's good for those of us who are lucky enough to have a digital component, and it's been harder for those of us who have a physical business as well, or people who are only in physical businesses. But I certainly am thinking about ways to grow our digital businesses and to continue to really reach those customers through the digital platforms. It's a much more efficient business, and I'm worried about what this next year is going to hold. So it's a very strange moment to be alive. You know, we're living history. It's pretty wild.
That's true, and it's a blessing to be alive. And speaking with you, in fact, I mean, we've done what, about 7-8 months, and we're still healthy, and we're here. It's a true blessing. I've got a couple of questions here coming from the audience. A question about your global business. You've expanded outside the U.S. in 2018, and the question here is: are you hoping to expand that further? Maybe reach Asia, where we are?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we will have an announcement hopefully coming very soon about a particular aspect of our Asian expansion. And hopefully that will be the start. We've actually just started shipping through a beauty e-commerce retailer called Mecca in Australia and New Zealand. So hopefully then next we'll be able to go into Asia, and we do have an exciting announcement coming soon.
Wow, that's news. Could you give us an idea of what sort of a market you're seeing here? Maybe a sort of a nuance in the way Asians view beauty and the beauty products that they use. What are you learning?
I think that Asians really are at the forefront of beauty, and the American manufacturers and analysts are always very, very curious and analyzing what are the top ingredients being used in the Korean and Chinese factories. And so that's having a knock-on effect. You see what the Asian beauty buyer, how they're influencing the market. So it's very exciting. And for us, especially because we're pioneers in clean beauty, and that's really important, we're also seeing that really start to gain traction in Asia. So we think that we could help introduce the amazing Asian beauty buyer to clean beauty in a way that it will be really exciting for her, because our products, although they're clean, they're very, very high performance. And we think the Asian woman will appreciate that.
Do you have an idea of how many Asian subscribers you already got to your Goop newsletter?
We do. We have an idea. We have quite a few. Obviously, our biggest markets are the English markets, but one day when we start to translate, I think that we'll be able to see a lot of expansion from there as well.
I'll start as something big. I mean, just given that kind of growth that you're seeing on the Goop brand here in Asia, are you looking to raise money in the coming year? I mean, you've secured $50 million from a 2018 Series C round just to expand Goop beyond the US.
I'm not looking to do any more fundraising at the moment. We are now we're profitable as a company, and we're in a pretty secure place. So for the time being, no. If we were going to do something like a big expansion effort or some M&A or something, maybe we would at that point, but not right now.
What about plans of going to the capital markets? Any plans to list Goop in the US stock market?
Not yet. I still have some goals that I've set for myself that I want to get the company to before we entertain anything like that. There's been a lot of talks of SPACs and people, talking to us about potentially going public through a SPAC, but we're just not ready to do that. We're not ready to direct list or list at all yet. Not yet.
All right, but give us an idea of what kind of goals you still want to get to that next level for Goop.
I think they're, pretty standard goals. They're revenue goals, they're reach goals, conversion goals, profitability goals. I just want to make sure we continue to operate really profitably. So I don't want to give numbers, but I have some pretty lofty goals for myself and for the company before we talk about an exit.
That's amazing. You're a forward-thinking person, and at the same time, when you look back, did you ever envision Goop to become what it is? I mean, it's 8 million subscribers, your newsletter, 2.4 million unique visitors to Goop.com, and you've got a Netflix series to boot. Then there's that podcast, the Wellness Summits, and the collection of branded goods.
No wonder I'm exhausted.
You don't look it at all.
It's the Goop Glow products, that's why, and concealer, mascara. I have to say, this business has been so interesting and such a steep learning curve for me. And I have learned on the job. I have made so many mistakes. I have wasted millions of dollars. I look back and think, my God, I wish I had known X, Y, and Z before I had made this mistake or that mistake. But I think I've come to a place where I'm very philosophical about it, and I'm proud of myself for taking the risk. I'm proud of myself for all of our failures because we've learned so much through the process. And I can only expect to be as good of a leader as I am today, as long as I'm being very accountable with myself and how I operate and have a very honest relationship with my team. I can only be as good as I am today. So that's kind of the way I look at going forward as well.
Yeah, I like that you humbly share that you've had a lot of mistakes. Could you pick one for us that you've learned from dearly that's brought you to where you are right now?
I mean, I suppose that the biggest mistakes I've made in aggregate have been around the technology piece of the business because I knew so little about it. I started with the worst e-commerce platform that you could imagine, that broke all the time, that you had to, stick widgets in all the time. It always broke. It was very capital intensive, hires that didn't understand what we were trying to build, so much software that we didn't need. So I would say that would be the area where I really made the most mistakes and the most costly mistakes.
Yeah, but it's not like you didn't have a think about where you wanted to go, because it's interesting that you thought about going into business when you were 17. At the time that you were really busy with your acting debut in High, you got drawn in just reading Barbarians at the Gate. I mean, that's a classic business book. What got you interested in setting up your own?
Well, I just always was very intrigued by business and the kind of chess game of business, and how, I grew up in New York City and so many of my friends' fathers were these big businessmen, and, running private equity or running these big investment banks. And I was just fascinated by it. And when I got the nerve to ask them questions at the dinner table sometimes, I was always fascinated by the answers. So but then of course I became an actress, and I thought, this is great too, but I really always secretly wanted to be in business.
You had the best of both worlds. You straddled two jobs for a time, acting and managing Goop. But what were the signs that catalyzed you at the height of your showbiz career, that you were feeling to become conscious that you were going to go the way of an entrepreneur?
It felt very natural, which is so strange, and I fought against it for a while because I thought, I have this great career and everybody knows me as an actress, and how am I going to start a business and no one's going to take it seriously, etc. But I just kept following it was like almost like I was holding on to, the tail of a kite, and it was just pulling me towards the business. And with every step, I enjoyed it more and more. And with every problem, I was more inspired to figure out ways to solve them. And before I knew it, here we are.
It's amazing. Following the kite, following your heart. That's amazing. But could you tell us how you got through that struggle, that transition? I mean, I still remember you at 26. I mean, you had an Oscar. Still remember you in that beautiful pink Ralph Lauren dress.
I think that the struggles have been the best part, because I think the hardest day almost was the day that I decided to press send on the first newsletter, because it was really me planting a flag and saying, this is who I want to be. And I don't know how I'm going to get there fully, but this is who I want to be, and this is what I want to do. And it had such a strong reaction. I mean, I remember, I was just sending out this little weekly newsletter with some recipes and some wellness ideas and travel things. And the New York Times wrote this huge piece about what was I doing and why was I doing this. And everybody was so confused by it. So I think, having the courage to do it and to keep doing it in the face of people criticizing us or trying to poke holes in what we were doing, and just staying the course and really keeping the bullseye in our sight and knowing, no, we're doing this because we really want to show women that they can be whatever it is they want to be. They have the right to ask questions about whatever aspect of their life they want to. Every woman deserves agency. She deserves to feel powerful. So we just kept going.
How did your family react that you were going to take that leap from showbiz to corporate business?
Well, for a long time, my mother was really disappointed. And she always loved me as an actress and was very proud of the career that I had been able to develop. So I promised her, if I ever sell the company or go public, that I will do a play.
Have you figured out which one it's going to be? If you were to do a play?
No. Maybe I won't exit until I'm 75 years old. Who knows? So I'll have to see.
Well, it's basically an entrepreneur coming out of the woodwork of an artsy household. I mean, your late dad, Bruce, was a film director and producer. Mom, Blythe Danner, Tony Award-winning Hollywood actress. So where or who in the family do you think you got your inclination to do business?
It's a really good question. I think that to be an artist is very entrepreneurial, and people don't always make that connection. But when you're an artist, you have to hold this big idea for who you can be and what you can achieve. And you have to have a level of self-belief that really only entrepreneurs have. And you have to keep going when everybody tells you no. And you manifest your life for yourself. And that's what entrepreneurs do as well. So I think there is a very close spirit between an entrepreneur and an artist. But I think the business piece, I just learned and loved from growing up in New York. And I always read the business section of the New York Times first, and the Wall Street Journal. And everybody used to make fun of me on movie sets when they were reading the art section and I was reading the business section of the newspaper.
I read the business section first, being a business journalist that I've been.
Sure.
Yeah, but you took some time before you embraced the call full on. You initially hired someone else to run Goop before you took on the reins. Why? And what did you learn from that whole journey to becoming your own boss?
Yeah. Well, I had two CEOs. The first was a guy named Seb Bishop, who had been an internet entrepreneur in London. He's an amazing guy and a close friend now. And I just thought, I don't know how to do this. Like, I can't do this. I don't know anything about e-commerce. I don't know anything about building a media brand. And I certainly don't know anything about building a contextual commerce brand because nobody had really done it yet. And when I decided to move to Los Angeles, he stayed in England, and then he had some personal things going on at the time. And then I hired somebody else, and I just realized, I need to fully embrace the idea that I know how to do this. And so I kind of just took the leap. And I think it was the right decision for the company. I don't know that I'm the appropriate person to stay CEO for the rest of the trajectory. I mean, I certainly don't want to be a CEO of a publicly traded company. I can tell you that right now. So maybe, my journey in this world will come to an end and it will evolve into something else. But I don't know. I'm just, my priority is what's best for the business. And I think right now, I'm probably the best person for the job.
Now, we got another question here from the audience. What's been the most significant barrier in your business career?
I think, it was difficult to raise money as a woman, raising money for a business that was focused towards a female consumer. I mean, it's well traversed information what little percentage female entrepreneurs get from the capital markets, so I think that was hard. It was difficult to explain what I was trying to do to all of these white men, essentially, who at the time ran venture capital. And we needed funding in order to really grow and expand. So I would say that was the hardest. I think it's getting easier for women now. There's certainly a big call to bolster a more diverse group of entrepreneurs. So I do see that happening, which I think is great.
Right, Gwyneth, I lost you there a little bit, but I did hear your answer. I just wanted to pick up on women at home, because it used to be that school hours were most productive for women entrepreneurs, but with all the family members working or studying from home, the chores have ended up significantly with the women, and the work piles up. So the judgment on women trying to have it all isn't any longer a choice, but it seems to have been forcibly imposed on us women. So how do you think we should manage? How do you manage?
Well, I'm very lucky in this respect because my children are now 16 and 14, and they're pretty autonomous. And my daughter can cook. My kids are very responsible about school. I don't have to say, okay, it's time to get on the computer. I don't have to sit next to them. My friends who have younger children are really, really struggling. And I think those are the mothers who I honestly do not know how they're doing it. And like, my hats are off to them. It's wild. I can't imagine. I don't know how women entrepreneurs or people who work at all are coping. But I think every family has had to figure out how they can do it and how to make it work. We all have to survive. We all have to eat. We all have to nurture each other. We have to work. And I think it's different for every household. I would just say to, any woman out there who's struggling, like, just be easy on yourself, because if you feel like you're trying to do all of these things and failing and then you're beating yourself up, that's the worst. It's like, just do what you can, do what's in front of you, and do your best.
Talked about your mom earlier about you going into business, but what about dad? Because your late dad, Bruce, as you've described him as your rock, the guy you went to with every problem. You always felt closest to him when you were in the kitchen. And that's what you wrote in the cookbook here, My Father's Daughter. What do you think he would have said of you becoming an entrepreneur?
Oh, he would have been so thrilled. He would have loved it. He was very interested in business too, and I think he would be very proud of what we've been able to achieve.
And that very same book channeled the ethos that Bruce had shared with you, and that included, among others, to invest in what is real. How have you come to appreciate what that means, investing in what's real, as you journeyed from your 20s, 30s to your 40s and onwards?
I think that in my 20s, I, like a lot of women, were chasing all of these ideas of what we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to achieve and who we're supposed to marry and all of this stuff. And we're on this hamster wheel running after these ideas of what actually other people think is right for us. And I think one of the most beautiful gifts of being in my 40s have been that I have had found such a profound connection to what is real. And what I mean by that is all of the things that feed your heart, and they're all free, and it's all about loving yourself, loving the people that you love, being connected to yourself, making sure that you're not sublimating emotions, being clear about what you think and feel, having the courage to speak honestly. And though that's really the foundation for knowing yourself and liking yourself and having a life that is of a good quality. Stopping caring what other people think is so liberating.
And you're surrounded by people who love you. I mean, you celebrated your birthday a month ago. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And you also celebrated your second wedding anniversary with Brad last month. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Amazing, amazing month. How did those go?
Just so wonderfully well. I just feel so, so, so lucky. My husband is just the most extraordinary, loving, intelligent man. I can't believe that we found each other. I'm so grateful to have the relationship. And, I think when you have a marriage that doesn't work out, you could hold that as a failure, or you could hold that as something to be ashamed of. And instead, I've just used it as this amazing building block to find the life that I really want, and I think the life that I deserve. So I feel very grateful, very, very grateful.
So what do you think makes a marriage work? What's the secret sauce?
I think, I don't know for anybody else, but I'll tell you what works for us. We like to do a lot of the same things. And we like to eat a lot of the same stuff. We always have the same idea about what to have for dinner. We love to walk and be physical. We also really like our quiet time. And we are I think, very good communicators. He's a better communicator than I am, but he brings out the aspect of myself that is, able to communicate in a really honest and open way. And he provides a very safe space for that. So that's what works for us.
And you've also got a great relationship with your children. I've seen that beautiful picture of you and Apple together with Mother Blythe. I mean, that was like 3 generations there of women, of really happy and connected women. How would you describe the relationship you have now with your mom and your daughter, where you are?
I feel very lucky. My mother and I we have such a good relationship, and, we didn't always have the easiest of relationships. I think, like all mothers and daughters, you go through your peaks and valleys, but I think part of being a true grown-up is disconnecting from the idea that you're a daughter and regarding your mother like a grown woman and regarding yourself like a grown woman. And for me anyway, it's really freed us up to have just a beautiful relationship. And then with my daughter, I'm just like, I am so in love with her. She's the best. And we are, so far, knock on wood, we don't have a lot of that teen mother-daughter friction. We get along really well, and she's so funny and so great. So so far so good, but I don't know. Check in with me, in a year or so. Let's see.
But you did post a beautiful message for her during her birthday, her 16th birthday. That was really beautiful. That's a
Oh,
mother's touch there and a mother's love. We've got a question here that concerns your passions outside of work. So, what are they?
cooking, and
Still,
I love cooking. I really like being active. Like I love walking through nature. I love exercise. I love looking at art. I love going to galleries and museums. Those are probably my main things.
there's another question here. What advice do you have for women aiming for leadership positions?
Well, I really think that every woman needs to think about who she wants to be as a leader and then really live that in those ways. So I think, you know, in my case, I've never wanted to approximate the male archetype in order to be a leader like in the male vein. I've wanted to discover what it means to be a woman leader and how to be collaborative and kind of embody the more feminine leadership qualities with balancing structure and boundaries, which are traditionally kind of the more male archetypal qualities. And I think every woman needs to figure out what is right for her as a leader and what is right, and then go from that place.
Well, how do you see men as a sort of a source of inspiration, perhaps, or possibly as mentors for women leaders?
Yeah.
Well, what's your view?
I think, I have a lot of male mentors, and I like having male mentors because they think so differently to how I think, for example. Um, and I think that men, first of all, traditionally they have a lot more experience in leadership than women have, which is changing. So, but they have usually a lot of institutional knowledge around. If you have a mentor that's been in a business for many, many years and in a seat of power for many, many years, who's also won and lost and learned amazing lessons. And, I think the strongest lesson I learned from men is around clarity, because I think as women leaders, we apologize. We, don't want to hurt feelings. We want everybody to feel included. And sometimes that is at the expense of clarity. And so that's something that I've been working on a lot and that my male mentors have in spades and that I think will serve women leaders very well.
That's amazing. That's an amazing takeaway, which leads us right into the next question. What is your leadership philosophy then?
Hmm. I'm still discovering it all the time, and I think it evolves with every stage of the business. But um, I do try to listen to myself, be very, very clear about what I think and feel. And I'm also try to be very, very open to what my executive team thinks and feels and understand everybody's area of expertise is real. Um, and I try to also, cultivate a company where people feel included and aligned in what we're trying to do. I think that's really important for morale overall, that people feel like they're important in an organization, which has been very, very hard to do over the computer, over these Zoom and Teams meetings. It's very hard to convey a good cultural feeling. So that's where my focus is going right now, because it's been a long time of this, it's crazy.
Yeah, you're right. Here's a question from a fan. When are you ever coming back to acting full on, full time? Are you coming back to acting?
Not soon. Not soon. My husband, sometimes I do it for my husband, and he has a deal at Netflix. So if I do it, it'll probably be directed by my husband and it'll probably be on Netflix.
All right. Here's another one. Who have been your business mentors?
I would say my biggest mentor is actually one of my venture capitalists. His name is Tony. He's the biggest investor in Goop. and he co-runs a giant VC here in the United States. And he is so brilliant, and he's so, oh my gosh, he's the person that I call when I need advice, when I need to know what to do. And he's been incredible. I also have kind of created a group of mentors, like Brian Chesky from Airbnb. I text him a lot. I also, I have like these mostly men on one side, mentors like Michael Dubin, who runs Dollar Shave Club, Michael Pressman from Everlane. And then I have an amazing group of female entrepreneurs that I also am texting with all the time as well, like Emily Weiss from Glossier, for example, and a lot of smaller e-commerce businesses as well. And I kind of serve as a mentor for those women as well. So I feel like I've cultivated a group that I can ask whatever the question is, I have somebody to ask it to.
Yeah, that's a really great resource right there. Just wanted to go back to the problem of access for money for the entrepreneur, the woman entrepreneur. There's a question here about how do you gain financial independence?
Well, it's a very tricky part of the process. I think if I had to do it again, I would be more prudent with the cash that we burned. I think at the time, there was a real philosophy around growing quickly and investing a lot in marketing. And it was kind of the thesis that all of these direct-to-consumer businesses had. I wouldn't do that again. I would say if you're lucky enough to raise money, and a great way to do that too, if you have a good business, is from friends and family, and then conserve cash, like grow from within the channels of what you already do.
Yeah, the fans keep coming, Gwyneth. The question here is, amongst all the characters you played, who do you relate to the most?
Wow, that's a really good question. I guess at this stage of my life, I relate a lot to Pepper Potts because she's a CEO. She has a huge love in her life. And I think she leads from a nice balance of the, feminine and masculine attributes. And so probably Pepper. She's a mom when we see her last. So I would say that.
I thought you might have said Viola from Shakespeare in Love because Brad made a special mention of Shakespeare during your wedding ceremony.
I think he thinks that he thinks I'm a good muse. So that's very sweet.
That's very sweet. We've got a final question here before we go. Gwyneth, what message do you have to your fans?
What I would like to say to all of you fans out there, thank you so much for sticking with me through all these years, like over 20 years of me being a public figure, for being an actor and now an entrepreneur. And the fact that you all have stayed with me, I can feel your love and support. And I'm just so grateful to have this family of people out in the world who support me. So I want to say I love you and thank you.
You got a lot of fans here in Asia, and you're not going away, Gwyneth. You're coming here to Asia with Goop.
Right.
So carry on surprising us. It's been such a pleasure catching up with you, Gwyneth. Thank you so much for the opportunity, for being who you are as a mom, a wife, daughter, business leader, innovator. You give great reason to follow our hearts and hold tight through this challenge we're facing. Keep well, Gwyneth.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your thoughtful, great questions. You were wonderful. Thank you.
You're equally wonderful. Thank you so much. And good health and continued happiness to your loved ones. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.